Hello and welcome to another episode of Starside Chat. I am one of your hosts, Aaron, and with me as always is Zach. How's it going, Zach?
Pretty good. Recovering still a little bit from a pretty bad cold.
Yes, you were
that I
under
had
the
like
weather
a week ago.
Last
week. We haven't been able to record for a few weeks because there were storms one week, and then this last week I had been sick, so I've played a lot of stuff because I've been sitting around just playing stuff while I recover.
Excellent.
But, so we got that to talk about, but that does mean we have like basically 3 weeks worth of news to talk about.
Well, there's some pretty important stuff. Before we get to probably the most important stuff, we'll talk about that Asteroid City trailer.
Yeah, so not really games related, but you and I are both big fans of Wes Anderson.
It's true.
So worth giving it a mention that they have released a trailer for Wes Anderson's latest movie called Asteroid City. What do you think of this?
It looks good. I like it. I am very curious to see the aliens in it. I read speculation that because the cast list is insane. And we see a lot of the cast list in the trailer, but we don't see Edward Norton. And so people are speculating that Edward Norton is one of the aliens. And I'm very curious how Wes Anderson thinks aliens look. Like, are they going to be... He loves stop motion stuff, so I wonder if they're going to be stop motion or if they are just going to be people with makeup or what's going to happen. I'm so curious to see the production design on them and their ship.
Yeah, I can see it being sort of a life aquatic situation where all the like animals or creatures are done in stop motion.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cast list is crazy. It has this like sort of old sort of Technicolor like look to it in terms of like how it looks visually, which
really
is
flat
something
colors that just like pop next to each other.
Yeah. It seems that's a very Wes Anderson thing to do. But yeah, the cast list is insane for this. I think it's more of an ensemble, probably not necessarily around one person. The way some of his are, even though they have like a ton of people in it. But
it seems to mostly follow. I think the central narrative will probably be that Jason Schwartzman character with him and his kids who don't know that their mom is dead yet, and like Tom Hanks is their grandfather, but. I don't know. I think it like I like in Wes Anderson films there are like a lot of like subplots going on, or at least that was the case in like Moonlight Kingdom is a good example of that, where like there's a main plot, but there's also a bunch of subplots going on that are interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he always has like a big cast in it, but there's always like interesting things going on with them. They're not just like there to be like a famous face that's like basically a cameo, a glorified cameo. So. One of the few movies that I'm like excited to like go out to the theater to actually watch when it comes out. I feel like there's not been a ton of movies, even though there's been like some interesting things recently with like the Super Mario Brothers movie and like John Wick and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's been a while since I've been like super excited to go to the theater. So
do you think are you excited at all for that Oppenheimer?
Yeah, I do like Christopher Nolan movies quite a bit, so I will probably definitely go see that. And whenever the next Dune movie comes out, I'll go to that.
You know, I rewatched Arrival this week.
Oh, really? Holds up?
It holds up pretty well. I like time travel stuff. And I think I'd only watched it the one time in theaters, and so... That's one of those movies where they're like a lot of time travel movies where the second time you watch it, you're picking up a lot of stuff because there's like time elements or whatever. People know things before they should.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. He's a great director.
Yeah, I really like that movie too. I'm a big Denis Villeneuve fan.
We're both also Zelda fans, Zach.
Yes, and there are two things to talk about because we didn't get to talk about the gameplay demonstration that Nintendo put out. And this last week, a little bit more timely, they did the final trailer for the game that I know you have a lot of thoughts on.
I do. So let's, I guess, talk about the 10-minute one first, which ironically, even though it's longer, I feel like is less interesting than the final trailer. So when there's been a number of like data drops for Zelda. And in the last one we saw, you can like make cars basically, and like there was like a hot air balloon that was made. And I was a little cold on that. Mm-hmm. And then in this 10-minute gameplay, they went over the mechanics of it, and I'm a little bit hotter on it based on that. So they went over Ultra Hand, which is the way you can attach things together. Ascend, which allows you to jump up through things that have ceilings, which is very cool. And then
I'm not gonna lie, the implementation of like building like vehicles and things like that out of stuff is pretty much what I assumed it would be. Yeah. So I'm not, I was never cold on it. I'm curious what if it is basically more or less what you thought it would be.
Well, it's interesting.
Or what made you cold on it?
I didn't want it to be a thing where I had to spend, because like similarly, here's a good example. In Breath of the Wild, you could see a shining light on a mountain, and it would appear every once in a while. I think at like dawn or dusk, and you would be like, "Oh man, what is this?" Eventually, you would get to that mountain, and you would see, I forget what his name is, but like the Lord of the Mountain, that crazy like stag thing with like crazy antlers that was all glowing in his little pond. You could ride it. Like a mount, and you could bring it to a stable, but you couldn't stable it. The people that ran the stable would just be like, "Oh my god, this is like a god. You can't, like, what's going on right now?" So you could basically ride it for a while, and then if you got off of it, he would just like disappear. And my fear with games like where you create vehicles, and you would spend a ton of time making a very cool vehicle, but then there's no way to like save it. You basically leave it in the world, and eventually it's gone. But as they described it in this, it does seem like it's going to be more situational. So, like, he was on a sky island, and there's a river he has to get past. He can't swim across it long enough because he doesn't have enough stamina. It seems like you don't have your ice powers in this game, so you can't just create ice blocks. So, coincidentally, there is a bunch of wood and fans around, and so you have to use those to make a thing and cross the river. And I think that this is going to be something you can do anywhere, but also the places where you have to do it, it's going to be curated and like bespoke. Like you're going to get into a situation where something needs to be built. You'll have all the tools with you. You'll use it for that situation, and you don't need to keep it. And that's more interesting to me than like creating a cool car and trying to keep it with you at all times.
Yeah, I assume it'll be a situation where you'll need to get across like a river or whatever. So you'll just like put some logs together and like make a sort of makeshift raft and then get across. And then once you get across, you just like jump off onto the other side and just keep going. And you're like, it's not a thing where you like, oh, but I want my raft to stay with me. Like you don't need that, because you can always just like form another one if you encounter a situation where you need a raft again.
And that I'm into. So that's great, and the Ascend power is also very cool and opens up for cool traversal, but probably the craziest thing that they revealed in this 10-minute trailer was the, was it Fusion or Fuse?
Yeah, Fuse ability, something like that.
Which is, I've seen a lot of speculation on like all the podcasts I listen to of like, this is the reason it took so long. Because basically it allows you to fuse any two things together for crazy results. So they showed like a stick, which is like something you'll get constantly. In Breath of the Wild, you had like a million sticks, and you didn't really have a purpose for them. They were just around. But with this, you get a stick, you can attach it to a big old rock. You make yourself a boulder or a pitchfork, and now you have a super long pitchfork. Very, very interesting, and it sets your minds ablaze. What did you think about this fuse ability?
I mean, people are going to, for years after this game comes out, are still going to be, like, finding new ways to, like, fuse weird things together to create, like, crazy things. And I'm sure they'll be, like, all over the subreddit, oh, you can put this and this together and come up with this crazy thing. Try this out. And
well, and not to skip ahead, but in the final trailer, there's a shot where he's got, like, a sword with a shield fused to it. So, like, it blocks as he attacks, which is crazy to see. I I feel like they intentionally. So there's a part where they did a bow and arrow, and they were like, "What if you attach a leaf to this bow and arrow?" And then, like, I think very conspicuously, they cycled through some things.
Didn't show what it was.
Well, they didn't show that, but they also cycled through a piece of meat. And like, all the commentary I saw was like, "Man, what happens when you fuse meat to an arrow?" Because they eventually landed on like a chew jelly that made it into an ice arrow, but it's just going to be so fun to experiment with that. And also, they've solved the biggest problem from Breath of the Wild, I think, which was you're constantly collecting stuff, but you don't really, unless you're cooking, there's not really a point to like it. Like I don't really engage with crafting a lot in games, and I feel like a lot of people are that way. But this gives you the ability to, like, you're collecting all these resources. I collected so many like bugs just because they were there, and I never really used them in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
But now I have a point. Like all of the monster stuff that I collected, I killed hundreds and hundreds of monsters in Breath of the Wild, but I never really used their parts. Yeah, I just had them in my inventory, and now I can use a bat's eye to make all of my arrows homing, which is like a wonderful idea.
Yeah. Yeah, so when this initially dropped, I watched Kitten Krista's like sort of reaction to it as the thing was playing out, and they speculated that this was something that they definitely wanted to have in the original game.
Oh, really?
Like Breath of the Wild, and that's why you had all those items that you could just like pick up, and then they were like, but there wasn't really a point to picking them up because you couldn't really do much of anything with them. And so they speculated that that was supposed to be something that they got working in the first game, but they couldn't do it. And so they spent a lot of time while developing this game making that work. And so now they actually have a reason to have all those different items.
A ton of sense to me.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that probably is the case, that was a thing that they were trying to make happen for Breath of the Wild, and it just didn't work out. And the end result is that you just had a lot of items that you didn't really know what to do with.
Because like all gems in Breath of the Wild, I don't think there was a way to craft fire arrows, right? Like you would get rubies, and it would say in the item description of a ruby, like, contains the fires of, Mount Doom or whatever, or like contains the essence of fire. But I think all you could do with rubies was sell them, right?
I think so, yeah. It did seem strange that, like, you could have, like, flaming swords or whatever, but you couldn't, like, make flaming arrows for some reason.
You had to buy them.
You had to buy them. So yeah, it definitely seems like something that should have been in the last game and was conspicuously missing. Now that we think about it, like at the time, it didn't really occur to me that, clearly they were trying to do this and they just didn't get it working. But like now that we see where they've gone with Tears of the Kingdom, it seems pretty obvious that, yeah, that was the case.
So a great mechanical trailer, but I gotta say, it doesn't hold a candle to the final trailer, which I have conservatively watched probably around 30 or 40 times at this point. Because it's one of those trailers, similar to that first Switch trailer, where there's a bunch of parts in the trailer where I know there's going to be reaction. So I've watched a bunch of people react to this trailer. As well as, shout out to Game Explain, a wonderful YouTube channel that is famous for doing like super in-depth like analysis videos of trailers. And they have put out a number of videos about this final trailer, as well as that 10-minute gameplay trailer. But man, oh man, I texted you about this because we were both at work when it dropped. And I was lucky enough where I got to sneak away and watch it, but you had to wait until you finished out. And I texted you like, man, this is like such a great trailer. What was so did you watch it like on your phone initially, or did you watch it like on a TV or a computer?
I watched it on my phone, and I should have watched it on like a TV or something, but it's kind of one of those things where I don't really want to know anymore before I like jump in. So I've been avoiding watching like the big analysis like videos. I'm sure there's hundreds of them, but or even like the big reaction videos. So I basically watched this trailer like once or twice, and I'm just like, I'm ready for the game to come out. And I don't like, it was one of those weird things where we're like, they have crazily not really done much in terms of like revealing story details. And we're like, is that concerning? It's crazy that they haven't done this. And now the trailer's out, and there are people like me who are like, I maybe didn't need to see this.
I loved it. I love the music in it is so good. I get like choked up listening to it. It's just like the cues are really on point, and it's gonna be. There was a worry, I think, in the online world that like, oh man, same map. It's just gonna be basically DLC, a long DLC for Zelda, and this really makes it seem like no, there's gonna be a ton of crazy content in this game. It's gonna feel like a wholly new game, even though it is basically same engine, same map. It's going to feel completely reworked. And I am very excited for it.
Yeah, I think 100% it's still going to be a little bit of that God of War Ragnarok syndrome.
Yeah.
Where
that's a good point.
You're going to have a number of people who are just like, oh, it just feels like more of the last game. And so for that reason, they may like not rate it as highly as they should. But I think the first game was so good, and this like looks like just an incredible sort of layer on top of that, with like the floating islands that you can go to, and just like how crazy the story seems to be. That I think very similarly how you and I were very high on God of War Ragnarok, despite the fact that it does feel like more of the first game, but we don't say that as like a negative. But I think at the end of the year, when people are like, game of the year or whatever discussions, I think there will be like a certain segment of people that are going to be like, oh, it's just more of the first game.
Now, they did also, and we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, they updated the website for Zelda, and it did reveal a couple of extra things that are somewhat spoilery.
Oh, really?
Do you want to talk about that, or should we leave it?
Well, now I'm curious. I don't know. I probably will actually go back and watch some of those like Game Explain videos. So maybe go ahead and talk about it. If you don't want to know about it, if you're listening to this, just like skip ahead like 20, 30 seconds.
The website says that Link starts his journey in the sky and eventually comes down to the earth. So I think we're going to get another Great Plateau type situation where you start on a sky island, you can't get down to the open world until probably you collect all of your abilities, and then you will jump off that island, which I'm all about. The Great Plateau was one of the best tutorials of any video game ever. Maybe the best tutorial, because it was just like an open sandbox where you could take your time. Every little piece of it was a bespoke little lesson about the world. And then you were just let out into the world, and all of a sudden the entire world is like this. And now you've taken all these lessons. So I would assume there's going to be a very interesting, huge sky island where I don't know how we're going to get our abilities. I assume it's going to be similar where it's not going to be a shrine maybe, but there's going to be some sort of puzzle where you get the ability, then you have to solve that puzzle, and then you progress and you get like all 4 or 5 or however many you're going to get. But that's one piece of information. The other piece of information, there's a screenshot where you're in a deep dark cave, or possibly you're in Mount Doom, or you're somewhere underground. A great thing they've added in Tears of the Kingdom is coordinates on your map. So that's going to make like tutorials and stuff really great. It's going to make like sharing your gameplay really great, because people will see exactly where you're at. And there's an XYZ. And so obviously the Z goes up when you go up to the Sky Islands, but in this screenshot or like gameplay segment, your Z is like negative 400. So it's also like you're going to be able to go under Hyrule as well as above, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's like in Elden Ring, there was that entire city that was like underground that you could go to.
Oh yeah, when that asteroid hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I am getting more and more excited about it. I feel like it'll be kind of like, again, with God of War Ragnarok, where like that trailer came out and I was like, that's a good trailer. And then I like kind of let it sit for a long time and didn't really think about it, because it was still like, it felt so far away as far as release goes. And then like just before release, I watched that trailer like a ton of times. Just I couldn't get enough of it, and I got super hyped for that game. I feel like it'll be a similar situation with this one.
It seems cool. I mean, similar to, we talk a lot about Destiny on this podcast, and when Destiny launched, it didn't really have a story. Like, there was a story, but it was like extremely bare bones and didn't really make sense. Breath of the Wild, I feel like the story wasn't super important. A lot of it was just like wandering around. You could, do the divine beasts and like they would help you defeat Calamity Ganon or whatever. But Destiny 2 came out and they were like, oh no, story is the thing we need to focus on. And I feel like Tears of the Kingdom is a similar thing where we're going to get what was great about Breath of the Wild, but also there's now going to be, it's not just like the story's not going to take place in like memories you have to find. Like real things are going to be happening in the world. Here's something else we didn't talk about. In that trailer, you can get companions, it looks like. Like Sidon is fighting alongside you in one part of it. And there's like a little bird man, a little bird boy that is like you're flying around with, doing stuff with. So there's going to be sections where you're not alone, and you can maybe even, there's sections in this trailer where you're like riding a horse through a battle and villagers, like regular people, are fighting monsters alongside you. There's a part in the trailer where you're like bringing a wagon load of people somewhere. So Breath of the Wild, I think, sometimes felt a little lonely, like the world didn't have a lot going on inside of it. You were kind of just exploring solo. But I think you're not going to be solo for a lot of this, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Do you think there will be like 1,000 Korok seeds to get again?
That's a great question. I don't know. They have to know that a great part of Breath of the Wild was that like literally around every turn on every mountaintop there was a puzzle to do where you got a Korok seed. Like,
well, that and the shrines, like, that's the other question is, will they, like, they'll be like, oh, the shrines, something happened to them, and you have to go clear them again, but they're different this time, or I don't know.
I mean, you definitely don't, you have different powers this time, so that gives them a whole new palette of puzzles to make. Like, you no longer have, like, magnesis, so you can't just, like, have, oh, there's a bunch of metal, you have to, like, make electricity go through them or whatever, so they definitely have the ability to make new shrine. I think also there's no towers in this game as we know yet. And I think that, again, we're going to have to revisit this world in chunks where like you like reveal more of the map. I don't know how that's going to happen yet, but I assume it is going to happen. I don't think you're going to have the whole map like laid out in front of you all at once.
Yeah.
There are these like, in the background of shots when he's like falling through the air, you can see almost like searchlights. There's like things with searchlights. And I wonder if those are like something that will become a tower or something that allows you to like jump up in the air and like survey everything. I really don't know. I mean, there's so many unknowns.
I mean, it might even just be tied to the like sky islands.
It's true, yeah.
You just get up on one of the sky islands and it sort of has the effect of having climbed to the top of a tower. I'm
all about it. Whatever they decide, I'm sure it will be great. But I think you're right. I think Korok... Well, here's something else. In a screenshot, we don't really have to get into too many spoilers, but it seems like maybe the Enchanted Forest or whatever it is, the place where the Deku Tree was, is not there anymore. At least from far away, it looks like that. And there's a shot where he's riding his horse along, I think in that 10-minute trailer initially before he climbs up into the Sky Island, where you see a Korok like with a big old backpack on. And he says something like, gotta get home or something like that. Koroks are going to make a return, but I don't know... They have to know that it made it so much fun to like they made exploring so satisfying by having Koroks everywhere, and they did something mechanically very good by expanding your inventory. It also sounds like your inventory is going to be super important in this game if you're going to be constantly fusing stuff together. So yeah,
even more important than in Breath of the Wild.
Like you're going to pick up a stick and be like, man, I can't throw the stick away. I might need to fuse with something, as opposed to Breath of the Wild where I would pick up a bundle of, or like an axe and be like, well, I don't really need this right now. And I would just toss it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'll definitely, like, people were a little bit bummed to see that, like, weapon breaking was back again. But, like, is going to make more sense this time because you're going to be able to like basically craft on the fly like very wildly different things that to fight with than what you were used to in the previous game.
I think so too. I think it's a good compromise because like I think a lot of people were like, this is what I don't like about the game, weapons break. Even though...
Well, and again, I kind of think that was something they were going for with the first game. And so without it, you just had a lot of weapon breaking, and that was sort of a little bit of a complaint. But now that they got that working, then I guess you don't have to worry about it as much.
Yeah, it's a great compromise. Because I think they do all... Like, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like the main thesis statement is we want your imagination to go wild. We want you to experiment. And... a great way to do that, a great way to have, like, not just like, oh, I found this one axe, it's great, I'm going to use this for the entire game, is to implement weapon breaking. They want that creativity. They want to force you to have that creativity. And this is a great compromise where they're still making you be creative, more so even, but the weapons still do break, so you do have to a little bit think about, like, well, this is a great thing I've made, but it's not going to last forever. I need to constantly be on the lookout for new, interesting combinations. So I'm all about it. I think it's great.
What did you think of the Zelda-themed controller and OLED?
It was cool. I don't know that I need another Switch. I think I'm going to hold out for whatever Switch 2.0 is. I know that the OLED Switch is beautiful, but I will say 95% of the time I'm playing it docked on a TV. So I don't really get the benefit of the OLED. It does look nice, but it's not something I'm going to buy.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought too. It's a little late in the life cycle to release something like this, because there's always so much speculation all the time that like a Switch Pro or Switch 2.0 or whatever the next console generation for Nintendo is coming like imminently in the next year or two, and so it does feel a little bit strange. And it's not like with the DS line of devices where they were cheap enough that like every time they dropped a new like themed one, it was like fun for some collectors to be like, yeah, I'll pick up another like crazy Zelda themed 3DS or whatever. This is like, it's a little too costly to be like throwing money at new Switches all the time, especially when you already have one.
Very true.
Also, like, I did upgrade to an OLED, and I am a little bit kicking myself for not just waiting and getting the Zelda one, but I didn't, obviously, at the time we weren't sure if there was going to be one. But my Pro controller is showing its age for wear and tear.
Oh, really?
Like, the D-pad isn't that great anymore. So I'm like, maybe I do go ahead and try to pre-order that Zelda one.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
My Pro controller definitely has aged well, I think. I haven't been too rough on it, but I don't know. The one thing that would make me buy it probably is I love my Switch, but it is like a whole ordeal to move the dock to a different TV if I want to play it on a different TV. And those docks alone, I think, are like $80, even though it's just like a piece of plastic and a little card with like an HDMI port in it.
Yeah.
And if I had two docks, if I could just like be like, well, I'm playing on my big TV, or I could like move that to my desk because I just have a dock at my desk, that would be great. But I don't know. I think I'm going to hold out for whatever Switch 2.0, which I am on the record as saying, I think that the Switch 2.0 is going to fold in some way.
Yeah. I'm very curious if they find a way to make it so that it is like the Switch, but it has sort of that DS style, like clamshell foldable part, but instead of it being two different screens, it's just like a foldable screen. That would be something interesting. And I'm curious how they would like fold that into games, especially since like playing it docked is still hopefully something they're going for.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. But that's what I maintain.
I mean, I am sure that and like 20 other iterations of something like that are like in development at Nintendo right now. But
well, we won't skip around too much because we have a bunch of news. But something that leads right into this is Sony is saying that, well, not saying, but reportedly there's a rumor that they're developing a handheld, and it's gonna not really be a thing on its own. Like maybe you can play indie games on it, but I think the real push that they're doing is it's going to have PS5 remote play on it.
So I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure the complete details of this because to me it sounded like it was basically like they were making their own version of a Wii U gamepad.
Yeah,
where you could just use it to play remote play. And that was like you're not going to be able to take it like the Switch or like a Steam Deck, but you'll be able to like play on your couch and continue where you left off in whatever PS5 game you were playing. But somebody like whoever you're living with can still be watching something on Netflix and you're not dominating the TV. That's what it sounded like to me, but maybe I don't know the full details of it.
So I had a Vita for a while, and I used it to remotely play my PS4, like from another state, which is something you can do. So I would like boot it up, and this was when Destiny 1 was still happening, I think. I would boot it up and just like, do some. It wasn't a great experience, I'll say that. Like, it wasn't a great thing to hold, but. I don't know. I feel like this is a half measure where people want to play Sony games remotely, but they don't want to have to be tied back to their console. That seems just like Sony saw what Nintendo was doing with the Switch, and they were like, okay, let's not fully do this, but let's do something where we can claim that it's kind of like that.
This is like PlayStation Move stuff from the PS3 generation when they're like,
just makes
Nintendo's
weird
doing
stuff.
something really, really good here. They've really got something interesting. Let's do something kind of like it and just have it as this weird add-on for our current console. They're basically doing the same thing, but yeah, it's supposed to be basically a PS5 DualSense controller with like an 8-inch LCD screen in the middle. And it's not going to work without an internet connection. So it is that half measure. I honestly, it should just be a portable, and they should just have their own sort of like games specifically designed for that have like a Switch style cart that you can put in, but it is also capable of doing remote play. Like that should have been what it was. But I guess they're hesitant to get back in the mobile or portable game space after the like PSP and the Vita have like kind of failed a little bit, at least here in the West. But
well, and I think a part of that was that, millennials are now like purchasers of things. And when the PSP came out, it was a hard sell because I think it was like $300 or $400 for this console. And you had to ask your parents like, hey, I already have a PlayStation, but what if I also had this? Whereas now we can just like buy whatever we want. But I don't know. I'm so curious to see what this looks like. Maybe they'll reveal it E3 this year.
I don't think that will happen.
What?
Because unfortunately, E3 2023 has been canceled.
No, this is old news now, but we haven't talked about it on the podcast yet. But yeah, they officially were like, no, peace out. Everyone backed out, and we're done, basically.
I was going to say, do you think this is officially the death of E3?
I don't know. I mean, it's such a brand, and so much of our society is like brand recognition that I feel like some private equity group could buy the concept of E3 a couple years down the line and be like, no, E3 is back, and like we're in charge now. But yeah, as far as like the ESA goes, yeah, I think this is the final nail in the coffin, especially because Keighley is doing his own thing, his Summer Games Fest, and that's like pretty good. It's like taking off, and people, it's good to have him as a figurehead because he is like truly, you can tell he really cares about it. He's like plugged into the culture. He's like excited about stuff. He is like, he gets excited. He gets excited about things. And it's great to have him as like the figurehead of this thing, as opposed to like the ESA, which everyone is kind of like, well, they accidentally leaked all of our like journalism credentials or whatever, and like they're bad for a number of reasons. So I mean, Summer Games Fest seems to be the thing going forward, and I think it is not fully responsible, but at least partially responsible for people backing out of E3 because it's like old hat.
Well, so they did claim that they are going to work on future E3 events. I mean, but who's to say that those won't get canceled in the exact same way that this one did?
If they can't get the commits from like the big three, Nintendo, or even Ubisoft pulled out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you've got like Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, and even like some of the bigger publishers like Ubisoft and like EA that just do their own thing now, and they're like, we don't even need to like spend a bunch of money on like a big stage presence, in LA, when we can just make our own thing. And it'll do just as well for us, but we save a lot of money by doing it this way instead. Yeah. And then you have stuff like Summer Games Fest for Keighley to like sort of give a platform to like the smaller indie developers. And I think basically that's probably where it goes from here. It's just like you have the big companies doing their own thing. You have Summer Games Fest for smaller games, and then E3 is basically no more.
I mean, definitely there's part of it, I think, that the head honchos at like Sony or Microsoft, they must see the benefit of making a little bit of a showing at Jeff Keighley's thing, because it gets a lot of viewership, and he's a known guy. I think the last Summer Games Fest, or maybe it was the Game Awards, one of those, he figured out how to like get it shown in movie theaters, and so people were like watching it live in movie theaters. And I could see someone at Sony being like, man, we're going to do our own thing, but also we would control the news cycle if Summer Games Fest was, a bunch of interesting indie stuff, but also at the very end, we show something crazy and like millions of people see it. So I have hopes for Keighley that he's able to get those commits of like every once in a while, he'll get like a huge reveal from, a first party like Microsoft or Nintendo. But yeah, I mean, RIP to E3. It was fun to have it all bunched together.
If you're like one of those companies, it's easy to be like, well, we like Keighley and we trust him more than the ESA. And so we're just going to do his thing. Plus, like, Summer Games Fest is, it's just like a presentation. It's not like the E3 thing where it's like, here's a bunch of booths, come check out our stuff. And like send all your journalists to come cover our games and let people like buy tickets and come out. So I do think it's sad that part is gone, but I guess, I mean, Summer Games Fest could also like evolve into having some of that stuff. But speaking of sort of presentations of some sort, this is not really like E3, but it's maybe slightly that Summer Games Fest adjacent type of a thing. Nintendo announced that they're doing a Nintendo Live event in Seattle in September. This is a type of thing that they've done in Japan for a few years, I think. Several years. And they're just bringing it west, I think, this year. I don't think... They've not done one in the US before, have they?
There was that thing, this is, I think, slightly different, but there was that thing in the 80s, wasn't there, where people completed to, like, play, like, a marathon of different Nintendo games? That movie, The Wizard, is about it, I think. Or, where, like, you had to play Mario, and then you had to play something else. And I think that was put on by Nintendo, and you became, like, a Nintendo All-Star or something. There was a special, like, trophy you got. Before my time, and I haven't done a ton of research on it. But when I heard this, I was like, oh, it's like that, where it's this convention basically of all things Nintendo, and there are going to be tournaments. There's going to be live stage performances, photo ops with probably people in like Mario costumes and stuff. So it's kind of like their own little
this
con.
Is less. It's less for like announcing new stuff, and it's more just like, here's stuff for what we already have out, but we're doing like a fun event that people can go to.
Yeah, I think it's like a convention basically.
Yeah, which is cool. I think that it's cool that they're doing that, and they're actually like bringing it to the US as well, instead of just doing them in Japan. But yeah, it I mean, it's in Seattle, so it's a little far away for us, but I think it would be cool to go to something like this.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll do it every year from now on if it's a big success. I wonder if they'll change the city they do it in too, like if it'll be a roaming show.
I think it is, like, at least in Japan, I feel like they've maybe done them in different cities every time, but I could be wrong. Do you want to talk about Microsoft now? Because I have a few bones to pick with them. The big one is Redfall is going to launch not running at 60 frames a second on console. This has been a big topic of discussion over the last week or two, where basically everybody's like, if it's not, they announced this on Twitter, and all the responses were like, so delay the game. Like, if it's going to run at 60 FPS on PC, but the console version is not going to at launch, and it's going to be added later. And so everybody's like, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just delay it? Especially since it's coming out 10 days before Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
So
they should just delay it for that reason.
Yeah, even if just for that reason, like, delay the game 2 months, put yourself in July when there's not a lot of other things out. There's kind of a lot in June. So delay the game 2 months, give yourself time to like polish the game and to make sure that it's going to launch with 60 frames a second on console, and avoid Tears of the Kingdom and like Final Fantasy and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So this is a thing they announced. There was also like IGN had like this exclusive preview that they were able to do, and it was one of those sort of like the internet gets to make fun of IGN, but also it sort of makes Redfall not look as good. Where whoever they had playing the game for this preview was so bad at playing the game and doing just inexplicably weird things that, like, there was I don't remember who it was, but like years ago when they were like previewing Cuphead, one of the IGN people like couldn't even get through the tutorial because they like couldn't read the on-screen prompts to like jump and dash at the same time or whatever, and it was like a really funny thing that like people memed to death, basically. That also,
I feel like that happened right around the time when there was like that Doom 2016 came out, and the person who was playing that was just it was the same guy. Was the same guy?
It was the same guy. So this is sort of like reminiscent of that, where it's maybe not as egregious as that, but like it just like, I saw like multiple videos pop up in my YouTube feed of people saying like, this is like, if you're Redfall and you like sign on to give like IGN exclusive preview, like coverage of your game, and then they like release this video of people just like saying seemingly terrible at the game, it does a little bit make the game not look as good or enticing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would go that far, but that's just sort of the discussion that has been had this last week. And so that's another like sort of strike against Redfall in recent weeks. But another one is that it is going to have this Denuvo DRM anti-cheat software with it, and typically that makes the game not run as well. Mm-hmm. But it came out this last week that Ghostwire Tokyo, which just came out on Game Pass, and it's been on PC and PS5 for like over a year now. And it had like a big update this last week, and inexplicably they added this Denuvo DRM anti-cheat software to the game, and everybody's like, this game has been out a long time. Like, why are you adding this now? Also, like the pirates that like have, you know, pirated the game and put it up online, like have long already done this. Like, doesn't seem to be any point to doing this other than it's going to make the game run worse. And people are not into it. So there's also concern that it's going to happen with Starfield as well. Like, or like we know it's on Redfall, and like Bethesda games in particular, like the Fallout games and Elder Scrolls games, those tend to launch a little rocky, even though usually they are able to like turn them around and make something good out of it. Like, they don't always run the greatest at launch. And so there's concern that if you're going to have like anti-cheat software on a single player game from Bethesda, like it's going to just be kind of a mess out of the gate. So people are kind of mad at Microsoft over this, between Ghostwire Tokyo and Redfall and potentially having this stuff on Starfield. I don't know. It is inexplicable that they added it like more than a year after the game's already been out. It's far as Ghostwire Tokyo goes. It's got to be some sort of contractual
thing or something where it just happened because it says so on like page 58 of some contract that was signed. Because like it seems to serve no purpose.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I'm very curious as to the decision making behind that, and I don't think they've ever like acknowledged it or said anything about it yet. At least I've not seen that they have. But a really weird decision. But yeah, worth mentioning. I don't know if it's going to impact like the console version of Redfall, but obviously that one's not going to be running at 60 frames a second. I'm probably going to play it on PC anyway.
Yeah.
But and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was delayed to next year. This is a little bit of old news as well. It was announced, I think we talked about it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, about how they had delayed it and now they're delaying it again and just like knocking it completely out of 2023. And supposedly it is not because they want to change the gameplay, because people were kind of not into that last preview that they released. It just seems like this is not going well. Do you remember this announcement about XDefiant being a thing?
No. And I clicked on this and I looked at screenshots and I still don't really remember it.
So this was, I remember it specifically because it was like supposed to be this free-to-play sort of Call of Duty-esque shooter from Ubisoft that would be free to play. And I was like, oh, that would be a cool thing to have on Stadia. And of course, Stadia is no longer around. But
R.I.P.
This game, like, I hadn't heard anything for a long time. That's why in our show notes I put it in as XDefiant actually exists. I kind of honestly thought this was just dead or had gone away, and they quietly, it was among the projects that Ubisoft canned because there was that time that they announced that they dropped a whole lot of projects for some reason. But this is, it's basically their version of Call of Duty, but like Call of Duty mixed with Overwatch a little bit, because the gameplay I saw, Shroud was actually playing it this last week on stream, so I saw a little bit of that. But you're moving a cart, sort of similar to like Overwatch, but the gameplay looks like it feels quite a bit like Call of Duty. And instead of like classes, you have what they call factions, and that's where Ubisoft brings in all of its different properties, like Ghost Recon and
The Division.
What's the Division, I think, is going to be in there, Splinter Cell and stuff like that. And so instead of like normal classes like you might have in like Call of Duty or Battlefield or something like that, they have it's sort of like operators, but they're from a different faction and they have different like abilities and things like that. It is free to play, so I mean, there's reason to be concerned about like battle passes and stuff like that, but it could also just be, you know, sort of Fortnite like, where they've got like a lot of cosmetics going on, and so who's to say? It really just struck me that it was crazy that this game like basically disappeared off the map after being announced for so long. And to just see it pop up this last week, I was like, oh yeah, that was that thing, wasn't it? So another game that was announced and went away for a long time, and I completely forgot about it, is Disney Speedstorm.
I also forgot about this. I'm watching footage of it right now, and it is crazy. It's like, it's just a little kart racer where you can play as like Donald Duck or Mulan or Captain Jack Sparrow, like all properties. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is a free-to-play game. So there again, you do have concerns about how they're going to monetize it, but this is supposed to be coming out soon. It might even be coming out like this week as this podcast is going up. So you'll get a chance to try it out. It seems like the kart racing stuff is pretty good. I know Game Informer put up like a new gameplay today, this last week, showing off some of the gameplay of it. And I think Kyle Hilliard was the one doing it, and he was relatively positive on like the gameplay of it, but again, worrying about, you know, how the monetization goes and how some of that like long tail progression and stuff like that ends up being implemented. But
yeah,
have you seen trailers for that Renfield movie starring Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, seems like a fun little romp. It's not something I'm probably going to take a look at, but I'm all about Nicolas Cage having fun in his old age.
Yeah, I watched the trailer like a long time ago, and I was like, oh, that is hilarious. And also, like, how has he not done a movie like this already?
I mean, he basically has. He did that Vampire's Kiss back in like the 80s, where I think he actually...
Oh, that's right.
He like wasn't a vampire, but he thought he was. But yeah, I mean, he likes to ham it up, and he's having a great old time. So, you know, more power to him.
Yeah, so I think this movie just came out. Like you, I probably will not go to the theater to watch it, but maybe I'll watch it once it is like streamable. The reason I bring it up is there is apparently a Vampire Survivors like movie tie-in game called Renfield Bring Your Own Blood. And it's like $5, so a little bit more expensive than Vampire Survivors, but not by much. And I guess we're gonna just keep seeing a lot of these Vampire Survivors likes.
I mean, they're easy to make.
What was the sort of term we decided was a better term than Vampire Survivors like?
I've heard a couple people call them a bunch of different things. There's garlic likes. I've heard like what was it? Because originally it was like $2.50, so it was like 250 likes, or like a reverse bullet hell likes, where you're the bullet hell.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so something like that. I don't know. I mean, Vampire Survivors, I feel like I saw they like had some new DLC recently.
Yeah, they get a ton of new DLC.
So I feel like people will just keep playing that, but it's very interesting that movie tie-in games are still a thing, but this is like a perfectly obvious one. If you go see this movie and you're into it. It is early access, so I don't know if it's maybe something to wait on, but maybe worth checking out if you like that style of game. And then the last sort of preview for a game that happened this last week was a game called Immortals of Aveum, I think is maybe how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And Game Informer has an article where they describe it as basically Call of Duty, but with magic powers instead of guns.
Yeah.
And supposedly it's being made by like a team of people that used to work on Call of Duty, or at least like the sort of creative director of it used to work on Call of Duty games. And I don't know if it's going to be like multiplayer and that's why they're describing it that way, or if it is a little bit more of like a story driven game that just so happens to move and feel like Call of Duty, but with where you're like shooting powers out of your hands. But it does release on July 20th. So I guess that's a fair time to release. You're not necessarily, going to get eaten by Zelda or Final Fantasy. But
what did you think of the gameplay?
I actually didn't see the gameplay. The trailer I saw was like a completely story thing. Did you watch it? Yeah,
I watched some of the gameplay. I don't love the look of it. It's like kind of particle effects the game, where like, and I think that Forspoken game a little bit had this problem where like it obviously looks very cool what you're doing with your magic, but it does make the screen incredibly busy because like there's a million little particle effects happening, and I don't know. The screen seemed very busy to me. It's also very dark. Maybe it didn't benefit from me watching it on my TV during the day when it was like a little bit washed out, but it just seemed like there's a lot going on to track on your screen. Like when you shoot a gun in a Call of Duty game, like it doesn't really affect the screen that much. Like you get a little bit of a muzzle flash and then you don't really even see the like bullet really. It just like, hits the target. But with this, when you shoot your little guns out of your hand, like crazy magic happens that takes up like 75% of the screen. And I don't know. I would like to see this played a little more, I think. But it's not something I think I'm going to immediately pick up.
Yeah, I'm looking at a trailer now that has some of the actual gameplay in it. And it does seem like once you start like throwing some powers, it does take up a big portion of your screen, such that it would be hard to tell what you're aiming at. But I mean, you're not like going for headshots.
True. That's a good point. Yeah. You don't need the precision.
It might be fine, but yeah, I feel like this is going to be one of those games that like nobody talks about. It's just going to come and go. But games out this week. Did you check out Minecraft Legends at all?
No, I love Minecraft, but I like OG Minecraft, where you are set out in a world with not really a lot of objectives and you're just kind of building and chilling out. And this to me was not what I'm looking for. I don't really care about the lore or the world of Minecraft. So I don't think I particularly like this type of game. So setting in Minecraft isn't going to make me like it anymore. So it's a pass from me, I think.
Yeah, I'm not really a real-time strategy fan.
Yeah.
And I also have not really played Minecraft at all, so I don't really care about that aspect of it either. But a game I think we would both probably enjoy is Wall World, which did not come out this week. It actually came out earlier this month, but I just learned about it recently.
You sent me the trailer for this.
Talking about.
And you were like, hey, does this... Well, you didn't say this, but you were basically like, does this remind you of anything? And if you had said that, I would have been like, oh, yeah, this is just like a 90-degree flip of Dome Keeper, basically.
Yeah, so we played and liked Dome Keeper quite a bit, which is that game where you basically, story-wise, you crash land on like an alien planet, and all you have is like a dome that you live in to sort of protect you from the outside world. And then you just dig down beneath the dome to like collect resources, which you then use to upgrade your dome, because like every so often, after a certain amount of time passes, like alien monsters basically come attack your dome and try to break it and kill you. And so you have a certain amount of time to go down and dig down and grab a bunch of resources and go back up again and upgrade things. And this is basically that Wall World is, except, like you said, flip 90 degrees. You're now digging into a wall on the sort of right-hand side of the screen. But the interesting thing about this one is instead of it just being a dome, it is a dome-like sort of spider mech droid type of a thing that you can sort of crawl up and down the wall and then dig in different areas. And also I think you can even like move around during like the attack phase.
It's interesting. It does seem to build on all of the ideas, and it does look fun. So it's something that I might pick up eventually if it goes like on super sale. It's pretty cheap right now, isn't it?
I was going to say it's $5. Yeah, it's $5. So it's not like, it's even less than Dome Keeper, I think. But yeah, we like the core concept of Dome Keeper enough that like to have that, but have like it having been built on in like interesting ways like this. I think it could be a fun one to pick up. So yeah, I just wanted to mention it because I almost didn't suspect that there would ever be a Dome Keeper like, but now that's a thing. So.
I'm into it. I love that genre. So
yeah. Do you want to talk about what we've been playing and watching?
Yeah. So you were down for the count with a sickness, and so you had a ton of time to play things. It has been a little bit like getting into games that I'm a few years late on. I mean, we talked about maybe doing an episode even where we talk about Loop Hero. I have a little bit fallen off of that. I know you were playing some as well. Yes, I completed the second boss, and I have started... I think I have unlocked every card now, which I was still holding... I didn't have the Rivers, and I didn't have the Alchemist's Hut. But after watching some videos about how to min-max and like properly play the game, I was able to successfully beat the second boss, as well as unlock those cards. And now I am building out my base a little bit, and I'm going to attempt the third boss. But yeah, I'm still loving it. I still play it at least a couple times a week.
Yeah, I haven't played in a little while, but I got through that second boss and made it to the third one, and I started the third chapter, and it was basically like running into a wall. It was very difficult. So I almost need to like back it down back to the second chapter and just like grind for resources, because it does feel like it gets a little bit grindy because you need those orbs of expansion, which is like a resource that you only get to drop when you have a space on your loop where you can fight like 5 or more enemies at once. And even then it's only a chance for them to drop. So I've had runs where I was able to concoct a scenario where I would fight 5 or more enemies, but I didn't get the thing to drop basically at all the entire time. And then I've had other runs where I had a bunch of them drop and it was like very good, but it seems to be pretty hit or miss. And so that's kind of been the thing holding me back a little bit. In order to progress, I need like tons of those orbs to like build everything and upgrade everything. Yeah. And so, yeah, I have a little bit fallen off of that. And it's been a little bit replaced by going back to Legend of Keepers, which is a game we talked a lot about the year it came out because I was playing it on Stadia, but it went away because Stadia went away. And now I have rebought it on Steam because it was on sale. So I jumped back into that and was playing it. And it's just very much like Loop Hero. It's like a good sort of podcast or TV show game where you just put something on in the background and then you can just kind of click around. By now, they actually have like a bunch of new sort of dungeon masters to play as. And so there's like a lot more content to the game. So I've been playing through some of that, and it's been fun to revisit. And then another game I started playing was Tetris 99, which, like, a couple months ago, I was watching Kyle Bossman stream, and he played briefly some Tetris 99 because they had, like, a Fire Emblem Engage tie-in event happening. And so I was like, I should revisit that game because I played it initially when it first came out a little bit. And every now and then I like to get back into Tetris just because, like, I kind of grew up with it. I had not to date myself, but I did have a Game Boy back in the 90s. And every Game Boy came with a copy of Tetris. And so I did play quite a bit of that as a kid. So it's fun to get back into every now and then. And Tetris 99 not only is like the core mode fun to play, but there's like it's free to play if you have Nintendo Online. But there is also, I think, like a $10 DLC that basically makes it so you can play offline modes.
Oh.
And so if you like Tetris and you want, like, it does give it like permanence, you know, like even if they take the servers offline, they stop doing like the core mode online, you'll still be able to play it. So
have you won a match?
I have not. I'm not that good. But I think it is fun. Like every day they have 4 new challenges to complete, and each challenge that you complete gives you tickets. And if you save them up, you can unlock different themes. And so I've unlocked like a Luigi's Mansion 3 theme and a Zelda, like Link's Awakening, or not Link's Awakening, Link to the Past theme. And then there's like a bunch of other ones I want to get as well. There was like a Fire Emblem 3 Houses one that was only cost 1 ticket, so that was the first one I got. But it basically, instead of like the normal Tetris music, it'll play like music from that franchise and stuff like that. So it's pretty nice. And then the other thing I've been playing this weekend is Battlefield 2042.
That's an old game.
It came out in 2021, so it's a few years old, but they're still supporting it. It's still doing pretty well. I downloaded it on Game Pass, so I've been playing it via Game Pass. And it's pretty fun. They actually have like a double XP weekend happening this weekend as we're talking about it. And it's just been fun. I don't know. I used to play a lot of Battlefield. I've kind of fallen off of the series in recent years, but I played some of this when it first came out and thought it was fun. I think it's a little bit having like a Battlefield 4 arc where the game came out and initially it was kind of not in a great state and people sort of had problems with it, but like over time they've just like kept adding stuff onto it and fixing it, and now it's like in a pretty good spot. So I've been having fun playing that, even though I'm not great at it. I think it's a pretty fun game. Did you see the Super Mario Brothers movie?
Not yet. I want to go see that, and I want to go see the Dungeons and Dragons movie. But the weekends have not lined up. We had, I think we talked at the beginning of the podcast about how some storms came through where we live, and so we've been going out on the weekends to help out my girlfriend's mom kind of clear stuff up. It's been a long process, but we haven't had a chance to go see it yet, but I am very excited to go see it eventually.
So I did see it, and I did actually post a review on StarsideCafe.com if you want to go check that out. But we can wait and talk about it once you've seen it.
What are your overall thoughts? I mean, just like, high-level thoughts on it.
It's a perfectly enjoyable movie. Oh. It is not a great movie. It's not a bad movie. It is
good popcorn flick.
Yeah, I forget which podcast I was listening to, but somebody put it perfectly. They were like, if you have kids, this is going to be like the perfect movie to like put on and just like let your kids kind of zone out and not worry about it, not really think about it too much. I do wonder if they are like building to a bigger universe of Nintendo movies.
That'd be great.
Because there is like a line where like they look up to the stars and they're like, you see all those stars? They're like different galaxies out there. Like, and so it could be like, oh, the next movie is Super Mario Galaxy, or it could be
Star Fox.
Like Star Fox is coming and Samus is coming.
I would love to see a Samus. I'm all about Metroid now. That I like. Metroid Dread was great, and the Metroid Prime Remastered. I feel like that would be cool. It would like especially if it was scary, because kids like scary stuff. They like Five Nights at Freddy's. They like to be scared. And a Metroid game or Metroid movie where it's like a little bit creepy, I feel like would sell like gangbusters.
Yeah. The interesting thing I thought about this movie is that like everybody had a problem with like Chris Pratt being cast. And I think he was one of the least like, least problems with the movie. One, like the thing I suspected where like it maybe it's a little bit weird at first, but then you get used to it and you stop thinking about it. I think that's true. But also I found Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong and Jack Black as Bowser way more distracting and like taking me out of the movie because one, they're doing less of like a voice and it's just like their voice basically. And like at one point, like Seth Rogen, who has a pretty like what his laugh sounds like. And he laughs at one point and you're like, oh, that's just Seth Rogen. So it's not even a little bit Donkey Kong or whatever. And then same with Jack Black. Like I like Jack Black a lot, but it's a little bit like, we've talked about, The Rock, like casting The Rock in something like he's too recognizable. He's too big a star at this point where you don't see a character, you see The Rock. And Jack Black, it's like they put him in a recording studio for a weekend and were like, just do your most over the top Bowser impression. And it just is Jack Black. And at one point he like sings a song. Oh, really? And you're just like, it was weird to see Bowser like singing a song, but also it is just the most Jack Black thing.
I do remember there were rumors that this was going to be kind of like a musical movie. Is there more than one song?
No, I think there's just the one. Another thing they did that I didn't like is instead of like they did do a good job of like bringing in like Koji Kondo's like Nintendo music, but like doing it in like a big sort of orchestra way, which I thought was cool. And that's all the soundtrack needed to be, frankly. Like that's all they had to do. And instead they like also had a couple of parts where they had like some licensed music in there.
That sucks.
Yeah, and I was like, this is so not Nintendo. Like I think Take On Me like is playing like while they're like writing their Mario Karts or whatever. You're just like, did this need to be here?
Thank
like
you.
Yeah, they didn't need to do that. So that was something I didn't love. But I don't know. It's that Hollywood thing where like, oh, it's an animated movie. So you need like big famous stars to sell this. And you need like licensed music to get people excited. Just like, no, you don't need any of that. Like you're wrong on both takes. But yeah, anyway, it's still worth seeing.
I'm going to watch it for sure.
It's still an enjoyable movie. But it is a fine movie, is what I will say. What about you? What have you been playing, watching?
So I've been playing Loop Hero, but I've actually, in addition to playing and watching things, I've been reading something, Zach.
How highbrow of you.
So I love One Punch Man and Mob Psycho 100. The guy who makes those, I think, is great. Great tone. I love the animation style. I've never read the comics, though. And he just came out with another new comic, which I'm sure eventually will be an anime. But I was like, I'll read the comic first. And it's called Versus. And it is an isekai, kind of, where people are transported to another world, but it's like a really big twist on it. I don't want to spoil too much about it in case people are interested in it. You can watch or read the first like 5 chapters online now. But it like defies my expectations at every turn, where like I know what it's supposed to be and then it's not that, but it does something else that's interesting. And also just like the worlds this guy comes up with are so rich and interesting and also funny at times. If you're looking for something to read, if you're big into reading manga, I would say check out Versus, because it will invariably become a great anime, because this guy is just like a great track record. And I've really been enjoying reading the first 5 chapters. I don't know when chapter 6 is coming out. These are a lot longer. Like when I was reading Chainsaw Man, I feel like every chapter was like maybe like 10 pages or something. It felt very short whenever I would go to the next chapter. But the first chapter of this one, I feel like is like 60 pages. It's like very long. And then subsequent chapters are also like in the 30s or 40s of pages. Like stuff gets done in every chapter. It's very interesting. The story evolves. Which I'm still reading Chainsaw Man, and that is a little bit frustrating where nothing's really going forward week to week. It is come out week to week, which is nice, but it's like a snail's pace almost as far as the narrative. But yeah, check out Versus if you are into reading manga. It's shaping up to be great.
Well, on that note, do you have any parting wisdom?
If you've got an old tablet laying around, I maybe have talked about this before, but if you've got an old tablet laying around, an old iPad you don't know what to do with, read manga on it, because it's great. You can just go to, you don't have to download an app or anything, you can just go to a website, and it will auto-format, and you can just like tap to proceed to the next page, and it's great. If you have like a super old e-reader or something, even if it's like e-ink, as long as it has a browser, you can read manga on it. It's a great little idea for your little e-reader / tablet. If you have a Fire tablet, that'll work well as well.
You know, I actually do have an old Fire tablet. I should try that.
You should try it. It's great for, there's a ton of websites that will, you don't have to download any apps. You can just go to a site, and then these sites know that people use like tablets to read them. So they'll just like auto format to your tablet, and it'll go full screen, and you just like tap to proceed, and it's great.
Maybe I will do that, actually.
A great thing.
Good advice for this week. On that note, why don't you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Starside Cafe. Check out our website, starsidecafe.com, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.